I'm Lynn Veronneau. I'm the lead vocalist for the band Veronneau.
And I'm Ken Avis. I'm the guitar player and vocalist with the band Veronneau.
Speaking words of love and surrender.
Let's start at the beginning. How did you meet?
So we met at a music festival.
We did, and that was in Switzerland on the French-Swiss border.
Yes.
And I was playing in a blues band at the time, and you were playing in a funk band.
Yes.
But doing opera on the side.
Doing opera on the side, yes. We met at Soundcheck the night of a big festival. So it was just very, regular musicians are lining up. You're waiting for your turn to go on stage. And I noticed this playing and really was looking forward to the evening, to the show. But we met formally, though, a few months later. So a festival organizer introduced us and wanted us to work together on the show that he was preparing. He had heard something in Ken's playing, he had heard something in my singing, and he thought, there's something there that can match. I don't want the bands. I want you two guys to meet. I like to think that he heard something, and once we got together and started working on that project, we realized that, wow, this is a lot of fun. This is easy. There's just two of us to deal. No herding cats, and just a nice person to get along with. It was easy to work together. We developed the material very quickly, and then we decided, hey, let's do some more shows, and that's how it started.
How did Veronneau begin?
Well, that was some years later. So I'd moved to America, and Lynn had stayed in Switzerland for a while, and then she moved to the other side of America and up to Canada, and then back down to DC, where we got together and started to play again. And we were doing a lot of acoustic music, just the two of us, in that duo format that we'd formed in Switzerland. Yep. And Lynn was saying, I would really like to kind of explore more into jazz and to be playing, more venues, bigger venues. And for a while we were thinking about that, and then eventually we came across a guitarist, David Rosenblatt, who's with us now, and started to play with David. I played with him initially, and a lot of people had said to me, you should play with David Rosenblatt, he's a guitar player. But I never really believed that he was necessarily a good guitar player at that stage. I thought he might have known like 3 Rolling Stones songs. When I did meet him, he was an incredible player, and I went home and said to Lynn, I think we can do that jazz thing. I think we found the third leg of the tripod here, and we started to play very quickly. And we were out gigging within just a few weeks of having played together the first time. And then we took it further and we recorded an album, our first album, Joie de Vivre, which is still playing a lot on Pandora and different places. Maybe within 6 months of forming.
Yeah, 6 months of forming a band. So that was 2012 that we released. So so we've been together about 7 years at this stage.
It's been an exciting
6 years, yeah.
It's been an exciting journey, because that first album, much to our surprise, made it into the top 10 of the US jazz charts, and kind of launched us in a much bigger way than we anticipated. And then,
for sure. Because we started, it was kind of something that you've been wanting to do for a really long time, but had to put on hold for various reasons, right? And now that it was happening, it kind of took us by surprise, but we threw a lot of energy into it. And the fact that it took off was like, oh my God, this is working out. We're having a great time. Let's bring in, let's fold in a drummer and have a real combo, and that's at that stage that the band really started playing out. We started recording almost instantly, a second album, and ended up releasing 2 albums in 1 year.
And that second album did equally well, and it was kind of a concept album, because it was called Jazz Samba Project. And it came about because we suddenly realized one night we were playing a lot of Brazilian music, a lot of samba, bossa nova, and we realized that the album Jazz Samba had been recorded right in Washington, D.C., where we were, exactly 50 years earlier. And so we did research into that album and its importance, the way it brought Brazilian music into America and Europe. And we devoted the entire album to Brazilian music, both from the Jazz Samba album and some other things which we turned into bosses ourselves.
Yes,
We did the
yes.
process of bossification, where we took songs like a Bob Marley song, Waiting in Vain, and turned it into a bossa nova and different things like that. But the album really took off, and it resulted in a documentary film,
A musical play.
a musical play,
Uh-huh.
which we performed in and wrote, and a week-long or 2-week-long festival of Brazilian
Yes.
music and film and culture at the Strathmore in Bethesda in Maryland.
Has performing as a married couple affected your music?
Wow. That's a good question. I don't know. Look at us. We're frozen.
I think the practical side of it, it's a lot easier being together. I mean, we have one car for traveling to gigs. We
That's
share a
true.
room. There's a lot of practical benefits there. In terms of the specific music, we have a very good sense, I think, of what we like. And so we don't kind of experience the challenge of musical differences. There are some.
That's true.
There are some musics that I'd like and you don't like, and
Vice
that's
versa.
known, that's on the table.
Yes.
And I don't have to push doing country and western. We can stick to jazz, it's fine. So that's helpful. And of course, we spend a lot of time experiencing other people's music together, both going to see people live
Yes.
or listening to stuff at home. And so I think, like to say, people who live together tend to become more alike in many ways. And I think that's happened. Our kind of sense of what works and what doesn't is probably much more gelled together and combined than if we were not married and living together.
Yeah, I mean, it makes us really aware of one another because we're together almost all of the time. We do most of our projects together. We do have separate lives also with separate friends and separate interests, but the reality is a huge chunk of our lives is spent now together, and which is really fun.
Which is good.
It has some disadvantages though. If you are raising a family and both mom and dad are performing that night, that means you're out of the house at the same time. You can't really relay childcare among you two. You have to bring in other people. So that's at time it has been a little bit difficult to both be outside of the house at the same time, and of course in the evening when the family should be together at home. So that's been a little bit tricky at times. Yeah.
And it's funny, occasionally other musicians who are playing with us say, oh, well, you're a married couple, you're like a power couple within the band, we've got to be
That's
careful.
true.
But I don't think that's really created any real issues or problems. I hope not.
Who knows?
Who
Yeah.
knows?
Who knows? Yeah, in a way, I guess we're kind of a united front. Nobody can come and talk to me and say, oh, the guitarist is driving me crazy, right?
That
Or
vocalist
nobody
is like
can-
chalk on a board.
So I guess it could be intimidating. You would have to interview our teammates, right?
Yeah, don't do
see what
that.
the team said.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
What led you to create a world-infused jazz sound? Where did that inspiration come from?
I think it's wow. It's hard to see sometimes the separation when you think of your musical influences, musical tastes, the stuff that you like to do and the stuff you like to listen to. I think each of us can think in a very wide format, and the fact that the more you dive or dig into musical genres, the more common roots you find. So in Brazilian music, you hear a lot of African influences, and you hear a lot of gypsy influences in American music too. So to me, it's just a natural place for music to meet. I never feel that things are apart. I feel things are more alike than not.
I think in a way, one thing about jazz is if you think of jazz as a thing, you can go historically to the Ken Burns jazz image of the combo, the upright bass and so on, the kind of iconic jazz. But when you hear a lot of jazz right now, it's so wide and so varied. I think it's become a very big umbrella for music that's not commercial music, not the music you're going to hear on normal commercial radio. And a lot of the action has come from merging different styles, of bringing in a French gypsy jazz feel or bringing in something from Cuba or a Brazilian influence to the music. So I think there's actually a big movement of world jazz. We don't necessarily call it that, but we know that what we do is not that iconic jazz trio. And because Lynn sings in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese, that opens up from the very beginning to doing music from those different cultures, because we would say, wow, this sounds good when we do it this way with your voice. And then, of course, David grew up in Brazil, our other guitar player, and really went deep into that style of Brazilian guitar. And so he brought that to the band. We probably wouldn't have found ourselves doing so much Brazilian music had it not been for our meeting with David and what he brings to us. But then the first album, Joie de Vivre, had songs in French, Spanish, Portuguese, and we were basically just collecting all the music we loved there. And that, at the end of the day, is what we're doing to this very day. We've not really decided upon this is our genre. We decided on music that we love, music that connects to the audiences we're playing to, and it tends to have created this sound that we do.
So we decided to take it further, and this upcoming album, Love and Surrender, has a lot more compositions on it.
It's maybe 50% original stuff.
Yeah, and we really wanted to do that. We really wanted to explore what our individual influences, having grown up, speaking French in Canada. Ken grew up in the north of England. David between the U.S. and Brazil, we just have this musical landscape that is very diverse, and we thought, let's write together in who we are now, and the music that we have experienced and also performed at different stages of our lives, and see what we can compose together. So I think we've come up with a sound that we're pretty excited about. And we also like to have guests, for me, for the same reason that I like diversity. I like to bring an extra layer, something that will stimulate me and excite me, and something that I want to listen to and that keeps me searching. So I think the new album has these elements into it, and I just wish that people will, spend a little bit of time with it and see if they get excited, just like I'm excited to present it.
You have a young son. How do you balance your focus as parents and working and traveling musicians? And do you have any pointers for other full-time working musicians who are also parents?
If I did have a tip, I don't like to give out advice. But the thing that became clear to me was I wanted to focus on being the parent that I wanted to be. I have said no to offers and opportunities that were really exciting, just because I felt they did not match well with the needs of my child. And I think you just have to go with your gut. What feels right to your family may not be right for another family. What maybe a child can live on the road with you, others can't. So. Yeah, that's where I decided to put my focus. I wanted to be a certain parent, and I have no regrets at all.
Does your son play an instrument also?
He doesn't. He's very interested in music. He loves music, and he's really gotten into music in video games, and that's been his way into it. He's obviously developing antibodies to our music because he's heard it so much being played around the house and rehearsed and so on. And it does impinge on his life a little bit. When we do have rehearsals, we bring musicians into the house, and I think a couple of weeks ago he said, "Mum, do you have to rehearse so loud? I've got school in the morning. I couldn't get to sleep." So there is that side. He's tried different instruments and nothing's really stuck with him yet. But my older son was the same. He tried different instruments and never really stuck to them. And then when he got to the age of about 16 and realised it was cool to play guitar and that girls might be interested in him, suddenly he became a guitar player. And he's now 30 and he's still in the music industry and still performing. So from those early years of saying, no, this is not my thing, and in fact, he would never even touch a guitar in those early years. It was like there was too much competition at home, or there were too many guitars at home. And now that's what he's all about.
And now he's a multi-instrumentalist.
Multi-instrumentalist in the music industry up in Canada. But with our youngest, we'll see what comes of it. And it would be nice if he does, because for me, it's been my social life, my professional life. It's been there from the age of 10 onwards, right throughout my life. Whatever else I've done, I've always been doing music as well. And so it's been such a gift for me, and it's been the constant thing, the thing that's never let me down ever in my life. And so you would hope that your kids find something, whatever it is, whether it's sport or music or reading or whatever it is, that can be that core thing for them. I hope he does.
I like to think he's very musical because he has old school taste. He loves Frank Sinatra. He loves the Beatles. And I do carpool in the morning, and that plays in the car every morning. We're singing at the top of our lungs too. I Did It My Way. And sometimes it's AC/DC. So, he's exploring music at his age. Just like we all did, and whether he plays or not, I do like the fact that music is part of his life. I think that's where
it's intriguing now, because kids like Liam are finding their access to music through films and soundtracks. So the last two Guardians of the Galaxy movies, fabulous soundtracks of all this music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and all of the music that's ever been made is accessible to kids now. So it always surprises me to find kids in their teens and early 20s who are really familiar with Led Zeppelin or with Thelonious Monk or whoever it is, because it's all there. So it all goes well for the future.
Ken and Lynn, you're both active in the local music community. Can you tell us more about what you do there?
We are radio hosts at WERA. We have 2 shows. One is the Antidote, which is a morning time show that focuses on music, and we play a lot of jazz, a lot of world, and
the music we love.
The music we love, and try to spice things up. We have occasional interviews also, which can be a lot of fun. And then we are co-hosts of a local music show. So that focuses on DC area musicians called Music Alley.
And that's been interesting, and that was a real... we had a plan with that Music Alley show because we knew there was so much good music going on in DC and musicians of every genre here, and yet there was no real outlet for them. Things like the newspapers now don't cover local music very much. You don't see reviews, you don't see album reviews. And so we really wanted to create a platform for the musicians of the DC area, whether they be folk or jazz or rock musicians, to get their material out to the public. And so we entered upon a real passion to do that.
Just about 2 years ago, going on 2 years now.
And hundreds of musicians we've featured on that show, all of high quality.
It's been really fun.
And I think for us, performing is one side of what we do. The other side of what we do generally is about engaging with the musical community and trying to engage the community.
It's like a greater mission, where a lot of things that we do fit in. And so we do curating.
We've been presenting festivals and music series at a local theatre. I've been doing a lot of writing for Capital Bop and some stuff in the Washington Post and the UK Jazz Journal, things like that, music reviews and articles. What else do we do? Well,
we mentor. Also, we mentor young musicians in various ways. Typically, how to get out there and how to get your music heard, and that's also been very. It's very rewarding. I feel very motherly sometimes, whether they know it or not.
It's great. A lot of those young musicians are going to have played with us on stage afterwards as well, haven't they? Which has been enriching the whole musical offering that we make. The other thing is I've got a new video coming out, a documentary that I've been part of a team building, a documentary called Anacostia Delta, which is all about the great guitar players of Washington, D.C. from the 70s, 80s, 90s. People like Roy Buchanan and Danny Gatton, Link Ray, all of these musicians. And it's the second documentary I worked on. The first one was called Bossa Nova, and it was about the making of that Jazz Samba album in Washington, D.C. in 1962, and about the influence of DC's musicians in creating that album and bringing Bossa Nova to a wider audience. So all of these things, a big mix. I'm sure there's things we're forgetting because we get involved in so many different activities. In fact, this morning I was working on a new CD sampler that I'm creating as part of the Antidote radio program to promote the jazz musicians of DC. And so this has been an artist-led project where they've selected tracks to put on this, and we're going to get it out and promote these DC musicians to radio to the jazz community to presenters, festivals, all kinds of stuff. And it's just a lot of fun to do this, and I think very worthwhile.
You know, if you were to put a tagline on the mission overall, it would be that we want people to know that DC is a music city with a politics habit.
Well said.
And people don't often think of DC as a stop. So there's other organizations also that are trying to present musicians that may be touring the East Coast, but typically they skip Washington, D.C. So now they're like, hey, stop here, guys. We get fabulous venues. We get the best food. And honestly, this is a foodie town. It's a music town. There's so much happening here. We just love the D.C. area. It's very vibrant.
Yeah, we're not originally from D.C.
As you might tell.
But we've fallen in love with it.
So what's next?
So, what's next? The album release is the next big thing on the list, isn't it? So that comes up in January with the launch at Blues Alley, which has become a kind of a second home for us recently to be playing Blues Alley. A great honour to be playing at that legendary club. After that, we've got a series of dates. Oh, we're doing a special project in February with the Virginia Music Adventures.
Yeah, so Virginia Music Adventures has approached us. It is an educational group that takes middle schoolers and high schoolers in a sort of a big band context, and they educate them. They also take them on international tours. They're going to be going to Senegal and Haiti next year, and they like to collaborate with local bands. So we've been invited to be part of their gala activity and to create a couple of pieces with the children, and I'm really excited about that. And we're discussing also with Blues Alley Antonio Robin's centennial coming up in 2018. There'll be a large celebration that is now just, the plans are being hatched. So we hope to be part of that collaboration.
And
so that'll be really exciting.
We can round out the year by heading off to England, ideally, or Europe somewhere in the summer, trying to put together a small tour to go and promote the album back over in Europe, which will be very sweet. So we keep it busy all the time.
And we'll be at the Kennedy Center also during the DC Jazz Fest. So we've got some really nice collaborations ahead of us. Very excited.
I'm glad you're keeping track of the dates. That's helpful.
I try.
Yeah.
What is your favorite type of food?
Right now I'm craving like crazy Earl sandwiches that are just down the street from here. So as soon as we're done, I'm heading over there for a sandwich.
Yeah. I love exotic food. I love spicy food. I love Indian food, Ethiopian food, all of those things. But the thing I can't resist is chips. Chips in the English sense, French fries.
Oh, French fries.
Yeah. Anything with potatoes
Mind
in it.
you love potato chips too.
I love potato chips too.
Like a lot.
Anything with potato soup I love, anything with
potato
potatoes.
Soup,
Yeah. I love that Indian potato thing. Is it aloo gobi? Yeah, that's nice.
Really good.
Potatoes and spices. You can't beat that.
That's good.
That's all of the major food groups there.
So if you had to choose one late night comfort food, what would that be?
Chips.
Potato chips.
Ideally with a glass of wine.
And sometimes peanuts.
What is your favorite color?
I love orange.
You used to have an orange coat, didn't you? That was very dramatic.
I had an orange coat. There's lots of orange walls in my history. I realize now with current politics that maybe
Orange.
It's not my favorite color anymore. I love red.
This is a good point.
Did I say orange? I meant red.
Yeah,
I love red.
Reddy orange, yeah. Much better.
What's your favorite color, Ken?
What's my favourite colour? It changes. I used to love...
khaki. I would say khaki is your favorite color.
Thank you, Lynn. I think the first time I had a favourite colour was I was in France on a train, and there were these gorgeous French girls, and they were all wearing woolly jumpers, long blue knitted woolly jumpers, round neck, and so blue was my favourite colour for a while. But it changes from time. And grey can be a very nice colour. I like grey, I went to Ukraine once in January. Everything was grey. and that was impressive.
I'm sure the food was great too, right?
Yeah, as I recall, yeah.
I remember.
And pickled, grey and pickled.
Grey and pickled, yeah. I remember this dish called, I mean, it loosely translated as fish in a fur coat.
That's a Ukrainian one.
You know, maybe it's Russian, so I
Okay.
apologize. But, you know, climate-wise,
Okay.
I think things were very grey. And it was very grey. It was like a grey fish in a potato crust. It's very
Yeah.
grey.
As I've gotten
Let's
older and put
remove
on
that.
a little bit of weight, black's become my favourite colour.
Yes.
Black is like my
Yes.
new diet colour, you know? So I like to wear black now.
And orange is the new black, so...
Orange is the new black. We're back to orange again. Who would have known we had such a good answer to this question?
I know, I'm not sure we nailed it, but...
I think we nailed it.
Who has been your favorite or most influential musician in your journey so far?
Wow, so many. Do you want to
Yeah.
take a
I
stab at it?
would have to start with the Beatles, inevitably. I come from a little town near Liverpool, and so the Beatles for me were both a musical thing and a social movement. They were the first people with accents like mine to make it onto the TV or the radio. Until the Beatles happened, we were kind of just persona non grata in the media. So they were a big influence in that sense. I then heard on that famous English program, the Old Grey Whistle Test, there was a live performance of Van Morrison with his Caledonian Soul Orchestra with strings and horns, and that blew me away. I thought that was fabulous, and through that, through the music Van Morrison was doing and the music he loved, that got me into jazz and into blues in a big way. Blues was a big influence on me for a long time, and I did play in blues bands. And I think more recently, a musician who I happened across in Russia, of all places, a Cameroonian bass player and vocalist called Richard Bona, who just to me is the most musical person I've ever heard in my life, an incredible musician. And I love everything he does, and probably that has an influence to some degree on the kind of world jazz feel that we have right now. It changes. I'm really interested in who's going to be the next person who influences me too.
I mean, it grows. The thing is, your musical universe is always expanding and growing. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I grew up with Genesis. As to this day, I love Genesis. And I like the compositional liberties that they took. And it was very classical in a way, that there were movements, you know. You could have a lot of drama, and then it could be very atmospheric, and then lots more drama. So I loved Genesis, and in parallel I love classical music, and I've always been into vocals. So I loved Maria Callas, and if you had a big voice, I love that. I grew up also with French chanson, so there's a lot of beautiful tunes from my childhood, a lot of gypsy music also, which weaves in there.
Django Reinhardt.
Django Reinhardt.
We haven't mentioned Ella and Joe.
Exactly.
Ella Fitzgerald and Joe Pass.
That was another moment where Ken and I realized, like, oh yeah, you know, we can definitely connect on a musical plane, and that's when you lent me Ella and Joe Pass.
Take Love Easy. What a great album. And
it's just voice and guitar, and they really are taking it easy. They're taking their time. They're gently exploring the music, and what they're creating is just mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
And more recently, Eva Cassidy, who was a vocalist and guitarist based here in the DC area, who has just one of the most beautiful voices I'd ever heard. And just very, very recently is so many of the artists that we discover doing performing and doing the radio shows here at WERA. Last night I was out listening to David Schulman's Quiet Life Motel.
That's like sampled violin with lots of loops and really complex but loungy rhythmical groove
with
music.
a live bass player, live violin also, and live trumpet player and vocalist. Just some really loungy, very trippy stuff.
Our mate Dave Klein, another violin player,
exciting world, a fusion violin player. So so that's where we are right now. It doesn't stop. Just beautiful music to discover.